Hi, Dylan will join Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. Zane Smith is still the front runner to join Farmer Motorsports in the third car in 2025, and Carl Edwards reiterated he's not planning to return to NASCAR to drive behind the wheel. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those real quickly. We've only got one paint scheme set to take a look at, and it's William Byron's 2025 Exalta Raptor schemes that we're going to see in 2025. These schemes were designed by Lefty, and I gotta say, these look absolutely incredible, especially that Exalta scheme. The flames, they look phenomenal. They look fabulous, and the Raptor scheme is probably the best Raptor scheme I've seen since we've seen Raptor come into play a couple years ago. I think they both look absolutely incredible. They look really amazing, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them on the racetrack in 2025. They look pretty awesome. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we'll have a couple Kyle Busch stories to talk about in today's episode, but it was reported by Trey Ryan earlier tonight that Kyle Busch has now led 200 laps in 20 consecutive NASCAR Cup Series seasons. He is only the fifth driver in NASCAR history to have 20 seasons in a row with 200 laps led. The other drivers are Rusty Wallace, I believe Cale Yarborough, Dale Earnhardt, and I believe Richard Petty are the only four other drivers that have done this. That is absolutely incredible. Kyle Busch has had an amazing career in the NASCAR Cup Series up to this point. I know the race did not end the way he wanted it to go, but he had a very fantastic run tonight. He had a chance to go to victory lane, and he's been faster as season has progressing going on. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins it for the end of the year, but congratulations to him on having another pretty awesome and fantastic milestone at Kansas Speedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about ARCA. As it was announced on Friday that ARCA has officially announced a multi-year extension with Menards. It's unclear how long the extension is with Menards, and Menards has been the main sponsor for the ARCA series since the early 2010s, I believe, or even the late 2000s, and they will continue working with ARCA for many, many years. It was also confirmed as well they will remain on Fox through the 2028 season. They'll have most race on FS1 and FS2 for 2025 and beyond. Fox has been the exclusive home for Fox for the last couple of years, and they will continue working with Fox for ARCA for the next few years. Not shocking here. I just hope their coverage gets a lot better. The coverage for Fox has not been very good in my opinion recently, but I think that they can do a better job hopefully, but I'm not sure if they're going to do a better job. So we'll see what happens down the road, but they will stay on Fox through 2028, and they will continue working with Menards at least for the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, Connor Zilisch made his intermediate oval debut in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and of course, coming off of winning at Watkins Glen a couple weekends ago, there's a lot of intrigue on how he was going to do. And he came into the race and did a very solid job, finishing in fourth place. Connor ran in front all day long, had a couple very impressive saves, and came home with a very solid top 5 finish. He's got a lot of potential, and to finish in the top 5 in only your second ever start in Xfinity and your first ever oval start in Xfinity is very, very impressive. The 88 car has shown a lot of pace and speed, and I'm really excited to see what Connor is going to do, considering he will be full-time in Xfinity in the number 88 car next year. This is a really great step for him, and it's pretty awesome and great to see that he had a fantastic run a couple days ago. Congratulations to Connor on getting a top 5, a really impressive and pretty incredible stat for Connor to finish in the top 5 at Kansas and finish 4th in his oval intermediate debut. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ticketmaster. As it's been reported and officially confirmed by Adam Stern that NASCAR Holdings is switching ticketing partners to Ticketmaster starting in 2025. It is known that SMI has been working with Ticketmaster this year for at least the last couple years, but now NASCAR will be working with Ticketmaster going forward starting in 2025. When I saw this, I was definitely very, very disappointed. And a big reason why I'm super disappointed by this is the fact that they charge a lot of fees for tickets on SMI races. When they were doing the tickets.com, they were not charging as much on fees. They were charging like $7 to $8. I saw a post on Twitter where someone was getting charged an extra $40 in additional fees. which they go through Live Nation, and Ticketmaster has a really bad reputation when it comes to this kind of stuff. I think this is one of the dumbest decisions that NASCAR has made in recent years, and I'm personally not a big fan of this move. I don't think they should have done this. I think it's a bad move overall on Ticketmaster's end, and I don't think they should have partnered up with Ticketmaster. NASCAR shouldn't have done it. It was a bad decision in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of the move, and I think it's not a great decision for NASCAR, in my honest opinion, to partner up with Ticketmaster. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Talladega. It's been reported by multiple different reporters in the industry this past weekend at Kansas that there is expected to be more changes coming on the next-gen car for this upcoming week's race at Talladega Speedway. According to Bozy Tatarevic and also Bob Pockers, it sounds like a new air deflector might be coming into play. An announcement on this could be official in the next couple of days. I hear about this, and one of the reasons why they're looking to do this is because of the issues with cars flipping over. We've seen multiple rollovers on the next-gen car. Corey LaJoie had a rollover in Michigan. There's a rollover for Josh Berry, of course, at Daytona, one of the scariest wrecks where he was upside down on the back like a turtle. And there were other near incidents where I think Michael McDowell almost flipped upside down as well. I think at this point, one of the things that needs to be looked at, instead of just adding an air deflector on the car to try to keep the cars to the ground, you need to look at the underbody. The underbody is a big reason for this. If they can find a way to get rid of the underbody of this car, I don't think you're going to have as many flips. I get going at a very super quick speed that this likely will end up happening, but it shouldn't be happening at these kind of speeds. There's no reason a car should be flipping upside down at 200 miles an hour. So I think looking at the underbody going forward should be the way to go, in my opinion. I really hope NASCAR is looking at this and looking to find a solution, because I think while I get what they're trying to do here, and it's understandable they're trying to make this move, at the same token and same time, I think they should be looking at different areas in regards to this and not just looking at adding another air deflector. Instead, we should be looking at other areas on the car, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Muniz. Now, a couple days ago, Frankie Muniz put out on Twitter that he basically was racing with a broken rib during the ARCA race and the Craftsman Truck Series race as well. This is very interesting to hear. Frankie Muniz obviously did not have a great night at Kansas Speedway running in the Truck Series race. Unfortunately, had multiple issues on the car, went many laps down. I believe he had to go to the garage at some point in the race and still finish around 30th in the race. But it's been a rough year for Frankie Muniz. He was rumored to be taking an ownership stake in Joey Gates Motorsports at some point this year. That unfortunately ended up falling through, and he's been struggling to make races this year, including he did not make the race at Portland earlier this year. And I think Frankie does have talent, but it's just been one of those years for Frankie. He just hasn't had the sponsorship funding to go to a top-tier team. I feel like Ford should be helping him in a pretty big way on that front, but I'm glad to see that at least Frankie's all right. It's a shame he did have a broken rib there, but at least he's all right, and at least nothing more serious than that at this point. So we'll see if he does race more. He's got a couple races scheduled going down the road. I don't think he's going to be at Homestead. I think he's running at Martinsville in a couple weeks, and then I think he's going to be running at Phoenix as well near the end of the year. It's unknown what his plans are at this point for 2025, but it's kind of crazy to see that Frankie Muniz did end up racing with a broken rib, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. As it was confirmed a couple days ago that Daniel Ricciardo will not be returning to Racing Bulls going forward and has left the organization after his last race at the Singapore Grand Prix. His replacement going forward is going to be Liam Lawson, who is going to be driving the car for the remainder of this year. While it's unknown if Liam Lawson will be part of the organization at this time in 2025, it's heavily rumored that Liam Lawson will be behind the wheel of the Racing Bulls car for the remainder of this year and going into next year as well. This has obviously been rumored over the course of the last few months, and really since about the time they announced Sergio was going to be finishing the year. It's been rumors for a couple weeks prior to Singapore that Daniel Ricciardo was going to be losing his ride. Unfortunately, I'm not really shocked about it, sadly. I feel bad for Daniel Ricciardo, and I feel like the team could have treated him a little better, but he did have a year to really perform, and he wasn't, unfortunately, performing really that well, and there were times where Yuki Tsunoda was outperforming him this year. That being said, I really hope Ricciardo does come to NASCAR in the future. I think it'd be cool to see him come over and race in NASCAR because he's had interest in coming and racing in NASCAR overall. And I also do understand why they're making this move. Liam Lawson is a very talented race car driver, and he absolutely should have been on the grid this year in 2024 instead of other drivers in the series like a Lance Stroll, for example, though Lance Stroll, of course, is the son of Lawrence Stroll, who owns Aston Martin at the moment. I don't know what happens for Daniel Ricciardo in the future. I think this likely is the end of his Formula One career, unfortunately, which is a shame, but it doesn't really shock or surprise me, to be honest with you. So we'll see what happens going down the road for Daniel Ricciardo, but it looks like his future is very uncertain at the moment, and there's a good chance and possibility that Daniel Ricciardo may just be out of F1 altogether and not coming back. And I know he's emotional at the end, and I do feel bad for him, but at the same time, I'm not really shocked about this and not surprised to see this. In my honest opinion, see Ricciardo not being back at Racing Bulls going forward. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2025 ARCA schedule. It was also confirmed along with Menards being announced as the entitlement sponsor going forward that the 2025 ARCA schedule has been officially revealed. The season is going to kick off on February 16th at Daytona, and something big about this race, this is going to be on Fox. This will be at noon Eastern. It will be on Big Fox next year. Then on March 7th, we'll race at Phoenix, followed by on April 26th, we'll race at Talladega Superspeedway. After that, on May 9th, we'll race at Kansas. Then on May 23rd, we'll go to Charlotte. After that, on June 6th, we'll race in Michigan, and then the next week on June 14th, we'll race at Berlin. After that, on June 21st, we'll race at Elko, and then on June 28th, for the first time in a long time, ARCA will be racing at Lime Rock. After that, on July 18th, they'll race at Dover, followed by on July 25th at Indianapolis Raceway Park. After that, on August 1st, they'll race at Iowa. That moves later in the year for the NASCAR Cup, Xfinity and Trucks, and then on August 8th, we'll be racing at Watkins Glen. After that, on August 17th, we'll be racing at the Illinois State Fairgrounds. And for the first time on August 22nd, we'll be racing at Madison International Raceway in Oregon, Wisconsin. After that, on August 31st, we'll race at DuQuoin. And then on September 11th, we'll race at Bristol Motor Speedway. After that, on September 20th, sailing moves back a little bit farther in the year to near the end of the season. And then after that, on September 26th, we'll race at Kansas. And then the final race of 2025 for ARCA will take place on October 4th at Toledo Speedway. Some pretty good changes. Obviously, Lime Rock coming on the schedule is pretty exciting. Also, Madison, a track that some people have liked over the years, that's coming on the schedule as well. I did notice that Mid-Ohio is not on the schedule for next year. Not shocking there, considering Mid-Ohio is not hosting a Truck Series day. You're not going to have that combination race to go with. So I think there's some good changes for sure to the schedule. There are more short tracks, it looks like, added to the schedule, and some of the bigger ovals are gone. There are 2 road courses once again, though, as, of course, Lime Rock will replace Mid-Ohio for next year, and, of course, some other big changes might be coming down the pipeline. Nonetheless, it's a very interesting ARCA schedule for sure, and I do like some of the changes, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dallas. As it was reported and then officially confirmed on Friday, the IndyCar's next street race will likely be in Dallas starting in 2026. And this was also confirmed from the report from Marshall Pruitt as well. This has a rumor, and there was a Michael Irvin, I think, was basically doing a podcast talking about this, and he actually had to delete that certain section of the podcast that he was doing. It sounds like they're going to be going to the streets of Dallas around the Hard Rock Stadium where the Dallas Cowboys play. Look, there's a big reason why this is happening. NTT Data in the U.S. is headquartered, of course, in Dallas. And NTT Data, of course, is the main sponsor of the IndyCar series. So that's why they're making this move. Obviously, it does make a little sense, but I'm also not a big fan of adding more street races to the schedule. You do have Texas Motor Speedway right there. Now, I'm not going to put full blame on IndyCar in this situation, considering the fact that basically SMI owns Texas Motor Speedway, and basically SMI is a rumor they're going to be repaving and reconfiguring the track maybe in the near future. So that's why they're not going to be racing in Dallas, racing at that area. But you have a perfect track right there to put on a great show a couple years ago. I feel like that this race needs to actually be good, and I'm just worried that with how street races can be for IndyCar at times, I'm not really sure we're going to see a great race at Dallas. I'm just not expecting it to be fantastic. We got to make it an actual racetrack, and I'm not sure if it will be an actual racetrack and it will be a good product. I'm not really expecting it to be fantastic probably, and I think especially with the World Cup happening in the U.S. in a couple years as well, I do think there's going to have to be some changes coming on that front. So I really hope they can find a way to make the racing product good at Dallas. I understand why they're making the move, but at the same time, there's definitely some questions that do need to be asked about the Penske ownership, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Day and Andy Jankowiak. If you watched the ARCA race on Friday afternoon going into evening, you saw the contact at the end of the race between Corey Day and Andy Jankowiak. On the white flag of the race, Corey Day was trying to move his way up to the front just in case if Tanner Gray had a flat tire because there was some contact between him and Amber Balkan on the final restart. Corey Day was trying to make a move to get up there and challenge for the win. And there was contact on the last lap where Andy Jankowiak had a flat tire. After the race concluded, Corey Day and Andy Jankowiak had a conversation after the race had concluded, and Corey Day did put a little blame on Andy Jankowiak while Andy came over to have a conversation about it for a second or so. Then Corey Day spoke to the media in regards to the situation. He said, "I'm not here to just get top fives, I'm out here to get wins." See? Corey Day, I think, is a very talented race car driver, but in this situation, I think he's handled it not very well. And the reason I don't think he's handled very well is because Andy Jankowiak is a driver who's also competing for positions as well. And you're the one who made the bad move. You came up the racetrack into him, you got into his side, and you cost yourself a shot at winning the race with the contact. I get you want to be focused on winning races and impressing even Kyle Larson. Even Kyle Larson talked about he's got a lot to learn. And I feel like this is not going to impress a lot of fans. There's already a lot of fans that aren't a big fan of Corey Day. And this is not a good way to get basically a good reputation in the garage. Andy Jankowiak is someone who does not have a lot of money. He's 36 years old. He's been racing in ARCA the last couple of years. And when he has a chance and an opportunity to run up front, he usually runs up front and does a really good job. So I really did not like how Corey Day handled the situation. I don't think it was the best thing that he could have done. And he could have done a much better job handling the situation overall. So I'm not a big fan of, like I said, I'm not a massive fan of how he handled the situation. I think it was a little bit unnecessary for him to go after Andy like that. I get you want to be competitive and I get you want to run up front, but at the same time, you got to be really careful how you act because people in the industry are watching you. Be careful how you act and the way you say it. I think it's something that he'll clean up when it comes to getting older. We'll probably be a little more mature going forward on this front, and Kyle Larson definitely has to talk about this kind of stuff with him going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, after the Xfinity Series race concluded at Kansas Speedway, Shane Van Gisbergen had a very solid run at Kansas Speedway where he finished in 8th place. But for most of the race, SVG did not have a good run. He got a really good interview with Eric Estep, who's a fellow YouTuber, makes some really good content. He basically spoke to SVG about that and pretty much SVG confirmed that Kaulig Racing has a lot of work they need to do on their cars. Absolutely, 100%, I agree with Shane. He had a pretty solid run, and that car was really good at the end of the race, and he salvaged a really good run. But early in the race, Shane was absolutely struggling. The Kaulig cars were completely terrible all day long. They all qualified outside of the top 10. In fact, AJ was the fastest qualifier for them, and he qualified in 14th. I know they just hired Ty Norris very recently, which I think is going to help their program going into next year. But when SVG, who was frustrated on the radio from what I heard, is getting frustrated on the radio and not happy with the situation, you know you've got a lot of work to do because Shane is a very talented driver and things should have gone a lot better for this team. And they absolutely did not have a good run yesterday with Kaulig Racing. And obviously he'll probably be better in Cup with Trackhouse Racing next year and things will get better. But I think they've got a lot of cleaning up to do with Kaulig. Obviously, their announced Ty Dillon going over there, which is questionable at best. And there's some other things that are happening over Kaulig Racing that are questionable. So I really hope they can work on it and get better because there's no reason that they should have performed as bad as they did at Kansas Speedway. In my honest opinion, overall, as an organization, they just did a terrible and bad job, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ed Carpenter Racing. As it was confirmed on Wednesday that Ed Carpenter Racing has officially announced their 2025 IndyCar lineup. It was confirmed that Christian Rasmussen is going to drive the number 21 car, moving away from the 20 car, but he has been reported to be full-time replacing Rinus VeeKay, whose future is uncertain at the moment, as of course he will not return to Ed Carpenter Racing in 2025. It was also confirmed that Ed Carpenter will run a third car in the Indianapolis 500 this upcoming year. It's unknown if Ed is going to run any more races with the charter agreement that got announced last week. It is unknown if Ed is going to run any more races past that. But the big hire is Alexander Rossi. Alexander Rossi will drive the number 20 car for Ed Carpenter Racing in 2025. This is a massive pickup for Ed Carpenter Racing, bringing Alexander Rossi in. Obviously, Ted Gelov is coming in, who of course owns the Splenda brands and the Java House brands, which have a lot of money in them. That's a big reason why you're seeing Alexander Rossi get this chance and opportunity. It's no secret that Alexander Rossi was the front runner and the favorite to go over to Rahal Letterman Lanigan, but we had the situation where Rahal got rated. Everything changed very recently. And I think Alexander Rossi is going to bring a lot to the table, especially on the ovals. But I think even on the road courses, I think he's going to be a major asset and a major role to this team and organization next year. And I think that he is going to do an excellent and great job with this team. I expect Rossi to have one of the best years that Ed Carpenter Racing has had. They still got a lot of work to do as an organization to get better, but I do like where they're headed, and I think it's good to see they're bringing Alexander in. I think he's going to do a very excellent job with this team, and I think this is a massive and major hire for the organization, and I do expect that they are going to be very solid for sure in 2025, and I think it's a great big pickup for them, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Michael Andretti. As it was shockingly announced on Friday morning that Michael Andretti will no longer be an owner and will exit the ownership group at Andretti Global that he has held since 2002. And it was also confirmed by Dan Towers and Michael himself that he will move to a more strategic position starting this upcoming year. And they'll have more details on this in the next couple weeks once everything does officially get told to the organization and to everyone that's part of the Andretti Global organization. This is definitely shocking, but some people have been saying that this has kind of been basically being planned for quite some time, and this has been in the major cards for at least the last couple months, which is definitely majorly surprising. Michael Andretti has been the owner of Andretti Global for a very long time, since 2002, like I mentioned. And for him not be the owner of Andretti Global, it is certainly going to be a major shock and a major change for the organization going into next year. There are a couple theories behind this. Number one, Michael probably just didn't want to be more in the ownership side, making all decisions for the team, which I think is understandable, and I definitely get that side for sure. Some people have theorized the whole FBI raid that happened recently at Rahal, and that definitely could be playing a major role for sure. But it's also no secret that they're trying to get to Formula One. And Michael Andretti has been very bullish about it, and he's been very much out against the FIA and the FOM, which I think unfortunately hurt their chances to get into Formula One. Even though they should be in Formula One over other organizations who actually are not putting the effort in, I think you look at Andretti and they should be in Formula One. If this is a way for them to get to Formula One with him not being part of it anymore and moving to a strategic position where Dan Towers can work on bringing the group in, it is what it is at this point. But this kind of also could affect their NASCAR endeavors. It's rumored that they have been trying to get into NASCAR recently, and I wonder with Michael not being the owner anymore of the team, I wonder if that's going to hurt that chance and opportunity of happening. But this is absolutely wild. I never would have thought that Michael Andretti would no longer be the owner of the team. Michael has provided a lot to the organization over the years, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens going into the future. Nonetheless, it's kind of crazy for sure, and kind of wild to see that Michael Andretti is no longer an owner of Andretti Global. Pretty wild stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, it was reported and tweeted out by Movement, who's put out some very interesting silly season stuff on Twitter recently. He basically was at a fan meetup at Kansas Speedway. And basically, Noah Gragson was on the stage for something. And Noah Gragson thinks that his number for 2025 could be the number 4. Front Row Motorsports has not announced their numbers for the 2025 season, but when I look at Front Row, I would have thought they used the 34, the 36, and the 38, considering those three numbers have been part of the organization. But some of the numbers from Stewart-Haas Racing obviously are going to end up being available. And of course, Front Row is going to be taking the place of Stewart-Haas Racing as one of the top tier Ford organizations going into next year. So then bringing the 4 number in would not shock me or surprise me overall. But I think it also would be sad to see him not use the 34, considering Loves has been a major partner with the team, and the 34 has been basically the gatekeeping number for many years for Front Row since like 2005 or 2006. It's been the major number for the team. it would definitely be a little shocking for sure to see them not use the number 34. I have to think the 34 is probably going to get used, considering we've seen people imply the 34 will be used potentially for Zane Smith, who we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But overall, I think it would be very disappointing for them to not use maybe the number 34 or 36. I thought that would be the numbers they use, but if it truly is the number 4, it's going to be interesting. Again, they still haven't announced their third driver, but like I said, Zane Smith is the front runner for that seat going into next year. And overall, we'll see what numbers they end up using. I'd have to imagine that announcement is coming in the not-so-distant future, probably as once they get their situation under control when it comes to the charter talk, considering they have not announced what they're doing when it comes to charter negotiations past this year. Going to be interesting to see if they do end up using the number that they are using, and it could be the number 4, which is very interesting in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about FedEx. Now, Denny Hamlin was speaking to media on Saturday, and Steven Sum from Front Stretch asked Denny Hamlin surrounding the question around FedEx. And Denny Hamlin spoke on the impact that FedEx has had on his career. And Denny Hamlin said that FedEx has had a major impact on his NASCAR career in a very positive way. It's been reported over the last week or so that FedEx could be dropping more of their sponsorship going into the 2025 season, and there's even a strong chance and possibility that they may even leave NASCAR altogether at the end of this year. FedEx has been the major sponsor of the number 11 car since 2005 or 2004. But they've been dropping their sponsorship as time has progressed and gone on since Denny Hamlin got behind the wheel of that car. And they started dropping their sponsorship in 2021. And every single year, the number of races they have been the primary sponsor has continued to go down and down and down. And it's unknown at this point if they're even going to be back in 2025. If this truly is the final year of FedEx being in NASCAR, it's going to be basically one of the longest sponsorship endeavors and work partnerships unfortunately ending. And it's going to be sad to see, definitely. But at the same token, same time, it really won't shock and surprise me. Because I feel like that sometimes sponsors want to make moves. Ownership change, CEO change has happened over the course of the last couple of years. FedEx is no longer sponsoring the Commander Stadium, which is another big thing to kind of think about as well in regards to this. So I think that is definitely going to have an impact for sure. But it's definitely sad to see for sure that there's a really good chance and possibility that FedEx may no longer be working with Joe Gibbs Racing after this year, though it's not confirmed at this particular moment. It's very likely to potentially end up happening. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Chase Briscoe. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Kansas Speedway, you saw the incident took place near the end of the race between Kyle Busch and Chase Briscoe. Kyle Busch was trying to hold off a hard-charging Ross Chastain who was starting to close on him at the end of the race, but Kyle Busch still had a pretty big lead. But you had Chase Briscoe right in front of Kyle Busch, and Chase Briscoe had been struggling all day long and had no pace and no speed on the inside of his race car. And coming to 31 laps to go, Chase Briscoe went up in front of Kyle Busch very slightly, though he did leave Kyle Busch a little bit of room on the outside lane. And Kyle Busch unfortunately got very sideways on the outside of Chase Briscoe and ended up spinning out, damaging the toe link on the car. And after that, the car was never the same. After the race, and Kyle Busch ended up finishing, I believe, in 18th or 19th in the race after having a chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. After the race concluded, Kyle Busch really wasn't fully mad at Chase Briscoe about the incident, but he basically pretty much came out and said that it's just been one of those years this year, and it's just like we can't catch a break in any shape or form. Chase Briscoe also spoke, and he said that he never touched Kyle Busch in that situation, and he says he really feels bad for Kyle Busch in this situation, but he was also trying to salvage his playoff spot to make it into the next round, considering Chase Briscoe had a very terrible run going. Look, I completely understand Chase Briscoe doing what he needed to do, especially considering the fact that he's in the playoffs right now. He's got to do whatever he can to try to stay on the lead lap. But I feel like when you have the leaders right behind you, especially when it's Ross Chastain trying to close in and Kyle Busch was looking for his first win of the year, and considering the fact that Kyle gave you courtesy chase a couple weekends ago at Southern 500 where he could have just drilled you into the outside wall and would probably result in Kyle Busch losing his win, he could have done that to you, Chase, and he didn't do that to you. So I feel like he could have given him a lot of courtesy. I also feel terrible for Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch, yes, made a little mistake. There's no denying that. But at the same token, same time, I really feel bad for Kyle because Kyle had a car capable of winning. And I feel like there's been a lot of races recently where Kyle Busch had a chance and opportunity to go to victory lane, and something then just goes unfortunately wrong for this organization. And it's just been tough to see this for Kyle Busch. I think Kyle still has a lot of potential to win, and he's been performing so well as of the last couple weeks. And it's tough to see him not have the performance that he's really needing to get it done at times. But also, like I said, this pace and speed's been there. So I feel bad for Kyle in this situation. Chase is definitely more at fault for the situation, but Kyle did also put himself in that bad position, and it was a dirty air situation. So I do feel bad for Kyle Busch. I understand what Chase Briscoe was doing, but I do think Kyle Busch is not at fault more than Chase Briscoe, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill and Riley Herbst. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, you saw the incident between Austin Hill and Riley Herbst. Coming to the end of stage number 2, you had Sam Mayer, who went on to hold off a hard-charging Eric Almirola, who we'll talk about here in just a short little bit. You had contact on the last lap between Austin Hill and Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst got a little sideways going down the front straightaway, but Austin Hill completely went up the racetrack, washed up the track, and got into Riley Herbst spinning out. After the incident had taken place, Austin Hill was absolutely apologetic on the radio to Riley Herbst, but you had Riley Herbst, who was very frustrated and upset about the situation. They had conversation after the race as well, as they had a conversation, and things actually went very, very well in this situation. Austin Hill went up and took a lot of responsibility for the incident, and after the conversation happened, there was a fist pump between two drivers. First thing I'm going to say here, I appreciate Austin Hill taking responsibility. I've been very critical about Austin Hill not taking responsibility in the situations. When it comes to other situations here, you go back to what happened between Cole Custer and him earlier this year at Charlotte. I think in this case, he showed a lot of maturity, and that's a good thing for Austin Hill. If he can show a lot of maturity and take responsibility when he does cause an incident and causes a wreck, that's a good step for me. If he can continue to do that, I think that's a really, really good thing. And I'm glad to see he took accountability. He doesn't excuse what happened, which again, it was unintentional, by the way. I don't think he wasn't intentionally trying to wreck him. It was just an accident, and it was a big mistake. But it was a very costly mistake for Riley Herbst. Now, granted, both drivers got very solid finishes at the end of the day, and Riley Herbst is looking at a decent position going into the next few races. So I also think that's why Riley Herbst wasn't as frustrated after the race. But again, I get Riley Herbst not being happy with Austin Hill after the situation. But I'm glad to see both drivers were able to sort it out and work out the differences here. And I don't think things are coming, especially with Talladega looming. I don't think you'll see any big wrecks or incidents caused unless, of course, someone does make a mistake in the middle of the pack. And then he got the Charlotte Roval that if Riley Herbst wanted to cause payback at that point, he could definitely cause a little bit of payback for sure. Do I think he's probably going to do that? I'll be honest, probably not. But we'll have to kind of wait and see. But I'm glad to see they talked after the race and had a good conversation. It seems like they're patching up between both the drivers, which is really great to see. Two kind of unpopular drivers nonetheless, but I'm glad to see things are working out between both drivers and there wasn't any other crazy situation in regards to that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chandler Smith and Cole Custer. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday, also, you saw a really great battle between Chandler Smith and Cole Custer at the end of the race. Both drivers were battling for 30 laps straight, putting on a fantastic, great show. Eventually, with about 10 laps to go, Cole Custer got the run he really, really needed and got around Chandler Smith. But then, with 2 or 3 laps to go, Eric Almirola got the run that he needed and got around Cole Custer to take the race lead and take the victory at the end of the day. After the race concluded, they had a very heated conversation for about a minute. Cole Custer went up to Chandler Smith complaining about the situation. Chandler Smith says, I would understand his frustration if I was in his position, considering Chandler Smith has been frustrated with other drivers for racing because Chandler Smith, for whatever reason, doesn't like racing other drivers at this point. That might be why he's not in a ride at the moment at this time, like Hailie Deegan. But Chandler Smith said he would have felt bad. Now, Cole Custer, on the other hand, basically said that he put me in the wall and put me in the fence, and I have payback coming towards Chandler Smith and was not very happy. Look, I don't know what Cole Custer's mad about, to be honest with you. Unlike the situation where Austin Hill and Riley Herbst kind of handled it maturely, this is not handled very maturely by Cole Custer. Look, Chandler Smith is racing you for a win. He's doing what he can to advance to the next round as well. What is he going to do? Give up the position and give it up to you? No, he's doing his best to fight for a win. The last time Chandler Smith won a race was at Richmond earlier this year. It has been almost 4 or 5 months, Cole, since he last won a race. He's not going to give you the win. He is going to do whatever he can to win a race, and you're both racing hard for a win and a victory. I think some of these people in the Xfinity Series have kind of forgot that you're racing for a win and doing what you have to do. I would understand if he really put you in the wall. He never put you in the wall. You kept running on the outside lane the whole entire race, and near the end especially, and eventually it worked out for you at the end, but you lost the race because Eric Almirola just had a better car than you in the whole entire event. So while I do understand Cole Custer's frustration a little bit, I also really don't understand it at the same time. And I feel like the payback is completely unnecessary from Cole Custer. I don't really get why he's frustrated. I do get it in a sense, but I also really don't get it. And I think it's a little frustrating to see Cole Custer get mad at somebody because they can't handle it seems like. And it's kind of frustrating to see someone get mad for just racing. It's a racing business, for crying out loud. You shouldn't be mad about racing somebody. And I just don't understand the frustration. I don't really get it, and I don't really understand it. And it doesn't make sense to me why drivers are getting mad for just racing. It's because it's a racing business, and you shouldn't be mad at somebody for racing somebody, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Eric Almirola once again. Now, Eric Almirola did pick up the win yesterday at Kansas Speedway and a pretty thrilling and exciting finish. If you look at the comments below, he actually put a little bit of an update as well, kind of talking about that they gave me a really great opportunity to get behind the wheel in 2024. It's been a really good year for Eric Almirola so far in the 2024 season. He's had 2 wins so far this year. He won in Martinsville and got redemption after the crash that happened 7 years ago by winning yesterday's race at Kansas Speedway. But he also really kind of put out a very interesting detail about this in regards to his future. It is unknown at this point if Eric Almirola will be back with Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. And if he isn't back with JGR in 2025, I think that would be a very great shame. Eric Almirola has been very good this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's had some very good runs this year. He's been up front on a consistent basis for most weeks outside of Watkins Glen, where, of course, they had an electrical issue in the race and they had a mechanical problem throughout the whole entire event. But outside of that, they have been very solid this year, and the 20 team, of course, has been the fastest car. Now, we do think that going into next year, Chandler Smith also will not be back with the organization in 2025. We do think that William Swalch and Taylor Gray are joining the team next year. But I would really love to see Ryan Truex go full-time with this organization and Eric Almirola get the other 2 seats. And I just don't know at this point he's going to be back. I think there is a chance with how well he has been running and the money he does have. I'd have to imagine he probably will run at least part-time next year with Joe Gibbs Racing. But I think he should be full-time in all honesty. And if you put him full-time behind the wheel of a JGR Xfinity car, I think he could actually contend for a championship. I really think he'd have a chance and opportunity, especially in a JGR car. I think he'd have a really strong chance and opportunity, and I would love to see Joe Gibbs Racing consider this an opportunity for Eric. I get Eric is a lot older now, and he probably doesn't want to run every single week, considering Eric is now 40 years old or around 40 years old at this point, but I do think Eric Almirola running full-time would definitely be cool. But again, I don't think he's ever going to go full-time, so I would definitely love to see him have a chance and opportunity to go part-time next year. If not, it is what it is at this point, but I do hope he gets a chance and opportunity, maybe in the not-so-distant future, to come back and run in 2025, but his future at this point is unknown, and it's unclear if he will be behind the wheel of a JGR car at this point for the 2025 NASCAR season. We'll see what happens for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. Now, someone asked a question in regards to what are Corey Heim's plans for the 2025 season. According to Bob Pockers, he believes that Corey Heim will likely be returning to the Truck Series full-time once again in the 2025 season, with most likely making some select Xfinity Series starts with Sam Hunt Racing in 2025. This doesn't shock me or surprise me. Look, I do believe that Corey Heim should be moving up next year to the Cup Series, and I think he should be getting the ride over Riley Herbst personally. But Riley Herbst obviously is the favorite to go to 2311 Racing, but 2311 Racing's future is also up in the air at this particular moment. And Riley did speak to the media this week saying he's really not sure what his plans are at the moment for 2025, though he still is the front runner to get the seat at 2311. Obviously, everyone's like, well, what about Joe Gibbs Racing? There's a lot of tension between Joe Gibbs Racing and Corey Heim. Obviously, Corey and Ty do not really like each other. It's no secret there. So that's been a pretty big reason why Corey's not been able to move up full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing. And what's a shame, too, is you see all these other drivers moving up next year. Nick Sanchez is going to Big Machine Racing. Christian Eckes, who's been Corey Heim's biggest threat all year, he's going, of course, to Kaulig. Same with Daniel Dye. He's going to Kaulig. And Taylor Gray, his teammate, is likely going to Joe Gibbs Racing. Same with William Swalch, who's made part-time starts with Tricon Garage. He's probably going to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. So I really just feel bad for Corey Heim in this situation. But at the same time, hey, stay in the Truck Series for another year, because I do think in the future he will end up at 23-11. But of course, Bubba Wallace has got a contract through 2026, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. And with the money that Riley Herbst is bringing to the table, most likely, he's probably not going anywhere. So I really don't know what the future for Corey Heim is after this year. I think he will be back with Tricon, though, next year, but it's getting to that point where how much longer is he going to stay in the Truck Series? I know he's still got plenty of time to move up, but he'll be 23 next year. And at some point, you're going to have to move up if you're going to want to progress your career. I just don't know what the future looks like for Corey Heim going into the 2025 season at this point, but I do agree with most people he should be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series next year, but it sounds like Corey Heim will be back in trucks. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. We do think he'll be full-time once again in the Truck Series with Tricon Garage in the 2025 season with the Tricon team. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Hemric. Now we're going to talk about the driver taking over this car in just a little bit, but Daniel Hemric did confirm on Saturday late morning that he will not be returning to Kaulig Racing in 2025 in any sort of capacity. That is not just the Cup Series, but also will not be joining their Xfinity Series program in 2025. We all know, of course, that Christian Eckes is driving a 16-car full-time next year, and Daniel Dye and Josh Williams are going to be driving the other respective rides for the team next season. This does not shock me or surprise me, considering Daniel Hemric has been rumored to be out of Kaulig Racing over the course of the last couple weeks, and of course, Ty Dillon will be replacing him going into 2025. I feel bad for Daniel Hemric in a sense because, but of course, Ty Dillon does bring funding and sponsorship to the table, which is why he's going to be getting the ride next year. But Daniel Hemric has been a decent driver this year in the NASCAR Cup Series. He had 4 or 5 top 10s this year, and I feel like he's put up some really strong performances throughout the whole entire season. So now the big question is, where does Daniel Hemric go in 2025? One ride I've seen some people suggest is McAnally-Hilgeman Racing and maybe going to the 19 truck. I had heard that Corey LaJoie had also been a front runner for the C for 2025, but it sounds like Corey LaJoie is likely going to be joining the Rick Rowe Racing Group next year. He's a favorite for the 51 car. So the 19 truck would actually be a really solid truck to go with, considering the 19 truck has been a championship contending truck for this year. Christian Eckes has 3 wins in that truck, and I think Daniel Hemric would be a really solid driver part of that team. I also think a good Xfinity Series ride could be out there for him. The problem is a lot of the Xfinity Series rides are drying up. We're going to talk about Carson Quaffle here very soon. He's likely going to Junior Motorsports in the number 9 car next year. We also know Connor Zilic is going there. AM Racing set with Harrison Byrne for 25. He's replacing Haley Deegan. Kaulig is set for next year. He's not going back there. RCR set for 2025. Jesse Love, of course, is going there. Same, of course, with Austin Hill returning to the organization. And most other really good rides are drying up at this point. So I think at this point, the best option for Daniel Hemric, unless he wants to find a really bad cup ride going into next year, I think the best option is McAnally-Hilgeman, because luckily there's a lot of truck rides that have not been announced, and I think the 19 truck would be a really good option for him going into 2025. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to what happens with Daniel Hemric's future for 2025. But I think there is a really strong chance and a really great opportunity that Daniel Hemric most likely could end up over at McAnally-Hilgeman. I think he could be in the 19 truck next year. We'll see if he does end up going there in 2025. Be cool to see him get that chance and opportunity. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Quaffle. Now, on Saturday morning before the NASCAR Xfinity Series took place, Junior Motorsports put out a teaser in regards to Carson Quaffle. If you take a look at this teaser video, it might be indicating Carson Quaffle's 2025 plans. And it looks like that Carson Quaffle could potentially be joining Junior Motorsports full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025, most likely either driving the number 9 car or the number 1 car in 2025. It's been rumored over the course of the last month or so that Dale Jr. is very interested in bringing Carson Quaffle full-time into Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. And I think it'd be really cool for him to get this chance and opportunity. Carson Quaffle has a lot of talent and has shown a lot of promise so far in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's had multiple top fives and has contended for a few wins this season, including not too long ago at Dover National Speedway early in the year, where he's actually leading a few laps in the race and was up front contending for the win and the victory. I think Carson has a ton of potential, and I think him replacing Brandon Jones in the 9 car going into next year would absolutely make a lot of sense. Now, if he's going to be full-time next year, he is going to need sponsorship and funding. Luckily, looking at the video, it looks like Bass Pro Shops might be sponsoring him. Now, they have not officially announced this at this time, but I'd have to imagine that the fact that they are teasing it, and the fact they're basically teasing it at this point, tells me they're very, very close to announcing this. I would not be shocked or surprised if this becomes official in the next couple of weeks, or within the next week or so. The fact they're teasing this, because usually when Junior Motorsports teases something, they announce it pretty quickly. So I'd have to think this announcement could be coming at some point this week. So this would mean most likely you have Carson Quaffle in the 9 or the 1 car. You have Connor Zilch in the 88 car going into next year. Sammy Smith most likely in the 8 car, and Justin Allgaier driving the 7. This would be a very solid and a pretty good lineup for Junior Motorsports going into 2025. And I think that all 4 drivers could have a chance and opportunity. I think Sammy Smith is the weakest of the 4 drivers, but I think that Justin Allgaier could obviously go out there and win a championship for you. Connor Zilch is going to win a lot of road course races next year and probably get 4 or 5 wins at least. And then, of course, you have Carson Quaffle. I think he's going to be really fast on short tracks next year and probably good on the intermediate tracks. And you never know, if he's good on a road course next year, he could absolutely contend for the championship. But I think him going full-time next year absolutely makes a ton and a lot of sense. And I think he's earned the right and opportunity to be full-time with Junior Motorsports in the 2025 season. We'll see if this ever ends up becoming officially announced. I'd have to think it is getting announced, so considering they're teasing it at this point, I think he's earned the right and opportunity, and I really hope and pray that he gets a chance and opportunity. I've wanted Carson to be full-time along with a driver like Ryan Truex, and it looks like it's going to happen. And to be honest, I'm really excited about this. I think he has earned the right and opportunity to be full-time with Junior Motorsports in 2025, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, earlier today, Carl Edwards was at Kansas Speedway, and he was there to be the pace car driver. Now, Carl Edwards spoke to a lot of media members in regards to a lot of things. He actually revealed that he has not been watching every single race in 2024. In fact, he's only been watching a select number of races because he actually doesn't have cable, which is kind of wild to think about in 2024. He's only able to catch the network TV races and is only able to catch races on the antenna. He actually watched a Daytona race a couple weeks ago, seeing Harrison Burton win, and was pretty happy to see that win and victory, and his wife has seen it as well. Now, someone had asked a question about him if he ever wanted to come back and race in the sport. And Carl Edwards did say that he is not planning to return in the near future or come back to NASCAR most likely in any shape or form, including in an announcing role. We talked about this on the channel back in May, where Carl Edwards had said that he maybe be interested in coming back in an announcing role, but he did also say back then he's most likely never coming back as a driver behind the wheel. He says he does miss getting behind the wheel at times, but he also says he would need a lot of commitment to be behind the wheel of a race car. Look, I would absolutely love to see Carl Edwards come back and make a one-off return to really close a chapter in his career. I would love to see him get a chance to drive for a team like 2311 or drive for a team like Trackhouse, for example. But at the same time, Carl Edwards has achieved a lot and has done everything he's wanted to do in his NASCAR career. He won 28 NASCAR Cup Series races. He won Xfinity Series Championship in 2007. He won the Coca-Cola 600. He won, of course, the Southern 500. Yes, he never won a NASCAR Cup Series championship, but he got a lot of wins during his time and was a championship contender really from the get-go. And yes, he had a very short NASCAR Cup career, 12 full-time seasons, but he had a lot of success. And I think that if he ever wanted, again, I would love to see him come back in a commentary role, which unfortunately doesn't sound like that's even going to be a possibility going into next year. But personally, him getting a chance, maybe along with Kurt Busch in the future getting a chance, I would love to see him come back and make a one-off return with a team like 2311 so he really could close that chapter out. But if he never gets a chance and opportunity, and if he decides to never want to race again, I wouldn't blame him, especially of how the sport has been in recent years, especially of how critical he was of them adding stages and stage racing back in the early 2010s. I wouldn't want to blame him for coming back, and I don't blame him one bit at all. But Carl Edwards, he still looks very, very healthy. For someone who's almost 50 years old, he looks extremely healthy, and it would be pretty cool to see him maybe in the future get that chance and opportunity. But do I think it's really going to happen at this point? Realistically, I don't think you're ever going to see Carl Edwards get back behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup car. And there's nothing wrong with that, or even an Xfinity car for that example. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's been a long time since he raced. He probably wouldn't be super competitive now. He'd probably be solid, but he wouldn't be super competitive considering it's been nearly a decade at this point, and the next-gen car is so much different than what Carl Edwards ever driven. He could have gotten behind the wheel of the Gen 6 car and been super successful if he ran in like 2021. But obviously now, that isn't going to happen at this point unless he ever decides to return, which, again, I don't think he's ever going to come back at this point. I'd love to see it happen, him come back in some sort of capacity and be part of the sport in some shape or form, but I just don't, at this point, think it's really going to happen. I hope it does change, and maybe he gets a chance and opportunity to maybe come back, but as of right now, I don't think Carl Edwards is going to come back, which sucks, but I don't think he will come back, and it sucks to see that he's probably never going to come back, which sucks, but it doesn't shock or surprise me, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about Ty Dillon. As it was officially confirmed on Saturday morning that Ty Dillon will be joining Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025, driving a number 10 car, replacing Daniel Hemrick. The first big thing you notice, the number 10 will start being used in 2025 to coordinate the numbers that they have in their NASCAR Xfinity Series program, which of course they use the number 10 and the number 16. They're obviously not going to get the number 11 because Joe Gibbs Racing, of course, will keep the number 11 for 2025. The 31 car most likely will be distributed back to NASCAR in some sort of capacity. Another team, maybe like RCR, could pick that up or pick it up for a third car in 2025. Now, everyone saw this move. The Ty Dillon was going to Kaulig Racing, and a lot of people were definitely really disappointed by this move, considering that Daniel Hemrick is a better driver than Ty Dillon. So far this year in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, Ty Dillon has been a major disappointment. He's only had 2 top 10s so far this year and won't be back in the 25 truck for the remainder of this year. He is going to be a mentor for Dawson Sutton for the remainder of the year. It doesn't look good on Ty Dillon's part that Dawson Sutton, in his first start in the team this year in that 25. Granted, of course, it was the fact that he did play some strategy in the race, but still the fact that Dawson got a top 5 in his first start in the 25, very, very concerning. And you think about the previous driver, Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto had 11 or 12 top 10s and made the playoffs in the 25 truck. So I think the driver was more of the problem than the car itself. Look, I like Ty Dillon. I think Ty Dillon is a good person. But Ty Dillon is not that good of a driver, and I really don't think he deserves the chance and opportunity to be behind the wheel of this car. But it all comes down to sponsorship and funding. And in that case, it does make a lot of sense. And it's also no secret that Ty Dillon and Kaulig Racing have been working together over the last year. And he was supposed to be full-time with Kaulig Racing this season in the Cup Series. But sponsorship and funding fell through. That's why he ended up going over to the number 25 truck for 2025. Now, 24, I should say. Well, the other big thing to look at, too, and a positive for Kaulig going into next year, is there is going to be a stronger alliance for the Kaulig Racing group, because RCR and Kaulig are going to be forming some sort of major technical alliance going into the 2025 season, which I think is desperately going to help Kaulig Racing. Kaulig has been absolutely struggling, but I think bringing Ty Dillon in is not the answer to really fixing your problems. I think someone else could have been a better option. My theory is that Ty Dillon is a placeholder for Christian Eckes. Christian is going to be full-time with Kaulig Racing in 2025 in Xfinity. And if Christian Eckes sets the world on fire in Xfinity next year in that number 16 car, I really do believe there's a really good chance and possibility that he is going to replace Ty Dillon, and Ty might go down their Xfinity program. So, what are my realistic expectations for Ty Dillon going into 2025? I'm going to be real and honest. I expect Ty Dillon to not run well next year. I think he's going to be one of the worst performing drivers, and I think AJ Allmendinger is going to run circles around him next year. I think AJ will realistically have a chance and opportunity to make the playoffs with the number 16 team next year. I expect the number 10 team to finish outside the top 30 points, and I would not be surprised or shocked if Ty Dillon is the lowest ranked full-time driver. He may get a top 10 or two throughout the year, but that's pretty much it. I expect most of the year for Ty Dillon, he's probably going to run around 25th to 30th most weeks, and yes, I know there's more cash coming in and some sponsorship coming in the team, but I don't expect this team to be really fast and super quick going into 2025, and it's a shame because a few years ago, the 31 car was legit fast with Justin Haley. Justin Haley legit had a shot at making the playoffs at points, and this team is in a really good position. But again, you have to understand that sponsorship funding really comes into play. And if someone brings a lot of funding to the table, they're most likely going to get the rights. Again, I do agree with most people that they should have put someone else better behind the wheel, and probably Daniel Hemrick would have been the better option to go up behind the wheel of this car. But I'm also not shocked and surprised to see this, right? When you have someone who has funding and sponsorship bringing it to the table, they're most likely going to be the chosen one who gets behind the wheel. So while I am disappointed to see that Ty Dillon is going full-time next year, and maybe he'll do better, who knows? Ty Dillon might end up doing better and do a good job. He did finish top 25 today, even though he did cause a big wreck at Kansas today. He might end up doing a really solid and good job. Who knows at this point? But realistically, going into next year, I really don't expect much from Ty Dillon, and I think, unfortunately, will end up struggling and not running well. I think he's sadly not going to have a really good year, and I think he'll probably, unfortunately, end up struggling. I hope he can do well, but I don't think he's going to run really good in 2025. I think he's, unfortunately, going to end up struggling, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're doing a catch-up on silly season. With Ty Dillon officially announcing his 2025 plans, there are now only 4 full-time opportunities that have not been announced for the 2025 season. And according to Bob Pockers, he indicated that there are 4 rides that are still not announced for 2025. Let's begin by talking about the easiest one, Corey LaJoie. Even though Corey LaJoie is only running the final 6 races currently at the moment for 2024 with with Rick Ware Racing, he's basically auditioning for his 2025 ride. Now, a run like he had today at Kansas, where he finished inside the top 15, is going to help his chances and opportunity. According to Bob Pockers, Corey LaJoie is the favorite to drive the number 51 car for Rick Ware Racing next season. This would make a lot of sense. Corey does bring sponsorship and funding to the table from Celsius and the other companies that he's bringing over to the team. And I think Corey LaJoie, while yes, he has made a lot of mistakes this year, there's no denying that. I think he will have a better opportunity to run solid with this organization. I think, like I said, he'll probably do at least a little bit of a better job in this car than we see in the other drivers behind the wheel. I like Corey LaJoie. Yes, I've been very critical of him this year, but I think him driving the 51 car does make a lot of sense. Let's move on and talk about Ryan Preece. According to Bob Pockers, Ryan Preece is still the favorite to drive for RFK Racing. It's expected that RFK is going to lease a charter from Rick Ware Racing and get a charter from them, and most likely use a number 60 car. The big reason is because of Kroger. Kroger is expected to leave JTG Doherty Racing at the end of this year and go over to RFK Racing starting in 2025. And you're going to need a lot of a car so they can use all that Kroger money. And Ryan Preece has a really good working relationship with Kroger. So this would make a lot of sense. And there's some people in the industry, including myself, who believe that Ryan Preece has not been able to show the potential that he has. Ryan Preece is a super talented race car driver who can absolutely get the best out of equipment if you give him that chance and opportunity. I think Ryan Preece has done a solid job at times in the lower series. I know he hasn't been that great in the Cup Series at this point, but I think him getting a chance and opportunity to run full-time with RFK, I think he'd be good. Now, I think he'd probably be the third wheel at RFK Racing, because I think Buescher and Keselowski are both better drivers overall, but I think him going full-time with the RFK Racing group would absolutely make a ton and a lot of sense. The second biggest thing, 2311 Racing is also expected to have a third team. Now, they're still inside the charter negotiations at the moment to figure out what's going on with the charter stuff right now, but many do believe that they are going to get a third charter, and according to Bob Pockers and multiple other reporters, it sounds like they're hiring people for a third car going into 2025. And the driver who's expected to get behind the wheel of this third team for 2025 is none other than Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst has been the favorite for this third seat for the last couple of months. I know Riley spoke to the media this weekend in regards to his plans. He says he doesn't really know what he's doing at this moment for 2025, but many people do believe that he is going to end up in his third seat. According to reports, and Breakheart brought this up on his channel earlier today, he says that the Terribles family, the Herbst family, is basically helping fund this charter for next year, which charters are, even though they're going to be going up into next year, they still are going to be pretty expensive and still have reasonable prices, and 2311 is asking for a little bit of help. Once Michael Jordan, everyone over 2311 gets it figured out, Riley Herbst will get the seat. And I really would wish that Corey Heim was the driver behind the wheel of this car, but it doesn't shock and surprise me that Riley Herbst is going to get the ride, considering Riley does bring funding and sponsorship to the table, and you need that funding and sponsorship if you're going to have an opportunity to run full-time with an organization. So Riley will most likely be the driver of this seat in 2025. And finally, let's talk about the big one. Front Row Motorsports. They're also expected to get a third car for 2025. They already confirmed they're going to have a third car for the 2025 season. And even though it's not been officially announced, and yes, they're also like 2311 inside of charter negotiations at this point, it is expected that Zane Smith is going to get this third seat for 2025. Now, Chandler Smith hasn't mentioned as a possibility. He's expected to now return to Joe Gibbs Racing next season, which we already talked about a little bit ago. But Chandler Smith's name has also been linked to the seat. But Zane Smith is the current favorite to drive the number 34, whatever number they end up choosing for 2025. This does not shock me or surprise me. Zane Smith has had a really good working relationship with Front Row Motorsports in the past. He won the Truck Series Championship in 2022 for the organization. Yes, he did leave them at the end of last year to join the Trackhouse group. But Zane Smith deserves to be full-time in this ride. Zane has absolutely been performing exceptionally well in the second half of this year. He just got a top 10 at Kansas this past weekend, and he's been absolutely doing an amazing and fantastic job over the course of the last few months. He's basically scored the 17th most points over the last 7 races, and he's just been doing a very good job recently. And I think he's been very impressive throughout the year. And his development and his improvement has been absolutely incredible. And him being teammates with Noah Gragson and Todd Gillen, who are all good friends, by the way, off the racetrack, I think this would be a really good combination of drivers. And I think Zane Smith could actually have a chance and opportunity to make the playoffs in this car if he gets a chance and opportunity. Not saying he's going to go out there and win a race in this car, but I think him getting the chance and opportunity to be full-time with this team would absolutely make a ton of sense. So I think Zane Smith is probably going to end up in the seat in 2025, and I think he's earned a right and opportunity to get this seat for next year. I know Kevin Harvick brought this up as not being a possibility for next year, but you have to remember Kevin Harvick has drivers in his agency right now that are not signed, including Ryan Preece and Riley Herbst, which is why he probably brought this up. But we are expecting that Zane Smith is going to get the seat, and I think Zane Smith has earned a right and opportunity to get behind the wheel of this seat for 2025. He's done a really good job the last couple months, and I think he's earned the right to be full-time with Front Row Motorsports, and I think he'll get that chance and opportunity for sure in the 2025 season. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Zane Smith's going to join Front Row? Let me your thoughts in the comments below, and what are your thoughts about Ty Dillon joining Kaulig Racing? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. There won't be more videos dropping today on the channel unless some major news breaks. Tomorrow you're going to see the entry list video for Talladega along with the race picks for the Truck Series race at Talladega. Then on Wednesday you're going to see a NASCAR news video drop along with the Xfinity Series race picks. And then on Thursday you'll see Cup race picks for Talladega. And then of course you'll see the paint scheme video. And then on Friday we'll have a news video along with the Truck Series race review as well. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.